It was a chilly Monday morning when 14-year-old Kayla Morris stepped into the well-known Briarstone Credit Union, wearing her neatly pressed school outfit, blazer, skirt, and loafers. Kayla felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Today marked a big milestone, her very first solo bank deposit. She held a $5,000 scholarship check, earned through months of academic excellence. To her, it wasn't just money. It was proof of her dedication and a step into independence. She was determined to complete this task without her parents' help. As she approached the teller with her documents in hand, her heart pounded in her chest. Behind the counter stood the branch supervisor, Dana Whitmore, a woman in her late 40s, dressed to impress and radiating authority. Dana's eyes narrowed the moment she spotted Kayla. Her polished smile faltered briefly as she saw the check. "A $5,000 check?" she said, raising her voice just enough for others nearby to hear. "For someone your age? Where did this come from?" Kayla felt her cheeks flush, but she stood firm and replied, "It's my scholarship award," her voice calm, though her fingers shook slightly as she handed over her school ID and the official letter. The teller, a young man named Eric, took the check and examined it closely. His expression shifted, neutral at first, then doubtful. He held the check up to the light, scrutinizing it as if it were fake. A moment later, he looked toward Dana, who had been watching with increasing suspicion. Dana stepped up to the counter, ignoring Kayla completely. "We've had several fake checks lately," she said under her breath, her tone cold and laced with contempt. "I'll have to verify everything." Panic started to creep in. Kayla hadn't expected this. She was just trying to deposit a legitimate award. She suddenly remembered her phone was still locked in her school locker. I need to call my mom," she said, her voice cracking. "She's expecting me soon, but I don't have my phone." Dana didn't even look at her. "That's not our concern," she snapped. "You'll stay here while we verify the documents." The words cut deep. Kayla stood frozen as Dana turned and walked away, her steps oozing with superiority. Dana stopped near the corner of the lobby, arms crossed, watching Kayla with an air of smugness. The lobby remained full of chatter and movement, but Kayla felt utterly exposed. She stood there, still and alone, as customers around her began to whisper. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with silent judgment, and time seemed to stretch endlessly. As the minutes dragged on, Kayla's humiliation only grew deeper. Each passing second stretched painfully long, the cold tile floor beneath her feet seeming to sap the warmth from her legs. Yet, even in that uncomfortable stillness, her mind stayed sharp. Kayla had always been observant, keenly aware of how people treated one another. The subtle shifts in tone, the difference between being respected and being dismissed. She had noticed it before in small ways, but today, she wasn't just seeing it. She was living it. She wanted to raise her voice, to demand her documents back, to tell them they were wrong, but she stayed quiet. Her father had always taught her to keep her head high when facing injustice. Still, she couldn't shake the thought. This wasn't about a check. It was about how she looked. Across the lobby, she heard Dana whispering to Eric, her voice hushed, but sharp. "We can't lower our standards," Dana said coldly. "We don't just let anyone walk in here and assume they belong." The words struck like a slap. Kayla's heart sank. They weren't questioning the money. They were questioning her, her hands balled into fists. She had earned that scholarship through sheer dedication, and now it felt like it was being taken away by people who didn't even know her. She glanced at the wall clock. More time ticked by. The whispers around her grew, but all she could do was wait. Kayla Morris wasn't your typical teenager. Though she lived in one of Briarstone's most affluent neighborhoods, she preferred modesty to excess. Her family's house was elegant, sure, but never flashy, decorated with care and filled with warmth rather than luxury. Her mother, Dr. Simone Morris, was a respected financial strategist, the founder of a highly regarded firm with clients nationwide. Simone had built everything from the ground up. She taught Kayla the value of independence, the belief that effort mattered more than legacy. Though the Morris family had wealth, they never flaunted it. Dr. Morris often reminded her daughter, "True wealth lies not in accumulation, but in what you do with it." Kayla had taken those lessons to heart. She poured herself into her studies, eventually earning a full scholarship to Grafton Academy, a top-tier institution known for its academic rigor. This wasn't a gift. It wasn't handed. To her, she earned it. Every late night, every study session, every shift at her part-time job had led to that moment. Her friends admired her discipline, how she juggled school, clubs, and work without complaint. But for Kayla, it wasn't about praise. It was about proving to herself and the world that she could rise on her own. Her mother had always been her biggest supporter, but she never allowed Kayla to cut corners. "I want you to have the same chances as anyone else," Dr. Morris would often say, "but I also want you to stand strong on your own." So when Kayla decided to go to the bank alone that morning, it was more than just a task. It was a personal milestone. She was only 14, but she felt ready to take on the world like an adult. That scholarship check, a reward for her months of dedication and discipline, was more than money. It represented maturity, self-reliance, and pride. Earlier that day, Kayla had carefully placed the check into her folder, tucking it between papers with precision. At the kitchen table, her mother had been reading over financial reports for a client meeting. But she paused, looked up, and gave her daughter a warm, proud smile. "Are you sure you don't want me to go with you?" Simone asked, her tone soft, though concern lingered in her eyes. "I've got it, Mom," Kayla replied, with steady confidence. "I'm 14 now. I need to start doing things like this by myself." Simone had nodded, a flicker of worry still dancing behind her prideful expression. She knew Kayla was more than capable, smart, prepared, strong. But a mother's instinct is hard to silence, especially in a world that often judges before it listens. Kayla had smiled and added, "I'll be back before your meeting's halfway done." It had seemed so straightforward at the time. A simple deposit, in and out. Never had she imagined it would unravel into a moment like this. Standing, alone in the corner of the bank, Kayla thought about everything her mother had taught her, to believe in fairness, to show respect, to expect dignity in return. But now, surrounded by whispers and suspicious glances, she was beginning to understand that life didn't always honor those values. For the first time, She was experiencing something she had only read about. That her appearance, her skin, could change how people saw her. Growing up in Ridgeview, she had never felt the sting of bias so directly. Sure, she'd heard stories. They'd talked about it in school, but it always seemed like something distant, a problem in books, in history, not in her life. Until now. She looked up at the clock again, her anxiety mounting. Why hadn't anyone come over? Why was she still standing there, when all she had done was bring in a valid check? The minutes dragged on, the silence in her corner growing louder. Her mother would expect her home soon, and she needed to call, but even that had been denied. Time crawled. The cold marble beneath her feet didn't just chill her body. It echoed the chill in the room, in the air around her, and the ticking of the clock overhead seemed to pound like a drumbeat of isolation. People came and went, but no one said a word to her. Kayla might as well have been invisible. A silent shadow in the middle of the bustling credit union. As she stood there, her thoughts began to race. She looked around at the other clients, noticing how some were greeted with clear warmth and attention. An older, well-dressed couple entered, and Dana Whitmore greeted them personally, all smiles and handshakes. She even led them into a reserved lounge space, her tone polite and respectful. Not once had Kayla been acknowledged like that. It was as if she didn't belong in this world of polished marble floors and gleaming wooden panels. A few minutes later, a young man with a noticeable accent stepped up to the counter, holding his documents. Dana had been watching from across the room. She immediately waved him off with a curt hand gesture. "The system's really slow right now," she said coolly. "It'll take a while to handle that request." Her tone was flat, uninterested. Kayla's stomach sank as she watched him walk away, clearly frustrated. But just moments later, a white couple came in with similar paperwork. Dana's demeanor changed instantly. She lit up with a bright smile, stepping forward with eagerness. "Of course. Let me help you right away," she said, her voice sweet and reassuring. "You're in excellent hands here." Kayla's chest tightened, rage and disbelief swirling together inside her. This wasn't a simple mistake. This wasn't just bad service. This was something darker. It was the kind of behavior she'd read about, heard about, but now was experiencing firsthand. Dana was choosing who deserved kindness, and she had clearly decided that Kayla did not. Her hands curled into fists, but she forced herself to stay composed. She refused to let them see her break. This wasn't the first time she had witnessed quiet, underhanded discrimination dressed up as policy or procedure. But this time, it wasn't abstract. It was personal. It was real. It hurt. It felt like the whole building had turned its back on her, all because of her skin. Then Dana's voice cut sharply through the room. She turned to the security guard nearby, not even looking at Kayla. "Keep an eye on her," she said, her voice cool and commanding. "Make sure she doesn't leave." Kayla's heart slammed in her chest. She wanted to scream, to shout that this was wrong, but instead, she focused on her breath. In, out, in, out. She had been taught to stay graceful under pressure. But today felt different. Today she didn't feel like a person. She felt like a problem, like a threat. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours. The only sounds were the quiet rustle of papers, soft conversations in the distance, and the sharp tap of Dana's heels echoing across the floor. Kayla couldn't shake the feeling that all eyes were on her, whispering, judging, waiting. Kayla could hear fragments of conversation, sarcastic comments, quiet chuckles and whispers laced with pity. She felt exposed. She felt helpless. But worst of all, she began to wonder if anyone even cared. No one had stepped forward. No one had asked why a teenager was standing alone in the corner of a bank, treated like she didn't belong. Her pain seemed invisible, just another ignored injustice in a world too used to looking the other way. Just as her thoughts started to spin out of control, something caught her attention. Dana was whispering to Eric at the counter, her voice tight with irritation. "Why is she still here?" Dana asked sharply. "We need her gone. Make sure she understands she's not welcome." Kayla's stomach turned. She had heard enough. Those words confirmed what she'd feared all along. This wasn't about security protocols. It wasn't about verifying a check. It was about exclusion, control, and the quiet assumption that someone like her didn't deserve to be there. She wasn't seen as a client, but a nuisance, an inconvenience to be quietly removed. As Dana turned away, Kayla couldn't stay silent any longer. "I'm not a problem," she said aloud, her voice trembling but unwavering. "I earned that scholarship. I'm here to make a deposit just like anyone else." Dana didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, she turned to the security guard and murmured, "Take her to the back. Keep her there until we're finished." The guard, a tall man with a stern expression, walked up to Kayla without a word. He grabbed her arm firmly and started leading her across the room. Heads turned, eyes followed, but no one moved. No one helped. Kayla's face burned with shame and fury as she was escorted away from the counter. Her heart pounded in her chest, fighting to stay composed. "Stand here," the guard barked, placing her in a spot near the back of the room, still visible to everyone, but far enough to be out of the way. Then he stepped back, crossed his arms, and kept watch. Kayla stood rigid, her arms folded, her chin high, trying to hold herself together, but inside she was unraveling. The hours of stillness were starting to take their toll. Her muscles ached, her thoughts spiraled. She had walked into that bank expecting respect, fairness, maybe even pride. Instead, she had been cast aside, made to feel like she didn't belong. Each minute dragged on endlessly. And the longer she stood there, the heavier the truth became. Something about this moment was profoundly wrong. Her eyes scanned the room, desperately searching for a distraction. Anything to break the suffocating weight of what had just happened. Her eyes landed on Dana Whitmore, still making her rounds across the room, the sharp sound of her heels tapping rhythmically on the marble. She was speaking to a sharply dressed man, tall, authoritative, someone Kayla didn't recognize right away. But something about the way he carried himself felt familiar. He wasn't just another client. He was someone important, and judging by Dana's body language, the way she leaned in, the nervous flick of her hand through her hair, he was someone she desperately wanted to impress. Then it clicked. His name echoed in Kayla's memory like a distant bell. Lucas Brennan. Her mother had mentioned him before, a few times in guarded tones, while discussing key business competitors. Lucas Brennan was the CEO of Crestview Financial, a major rival to the firm Kayla's mother had recently merged with. Kayla's heartbeat quickened. She watched closely as Dana and Brennan exchanged quiet words. She couldn't hear them clearly from her spot, but their body language spoke volumes. Dana leaned in, lowered her voice, and slipped him a manila folder marked Confidential. Kayla's pulse surged. Whatever was inside that folder, it wasn't meant for public eyes. It didn't look like a casual meeting. It looked like a transaction, one that shouldn't be happening in the open, or at all. Kayla's thoughts were racing. She had seen her mother spend years building integrity, trust, and stability in her work. A breach of confidence like this? It could be devastating. This wasn't just routine bank politics. This looked like betrayal. Kayla subtly adjusted her stance, trying to hear more, but her location made it nearly impossible. Still, she kept her eyes fixed on Dana and Brennan. She watched as Brennan flipped through the folder, his face growing more serious, then satisfied. He said something to Dana, too quiet to catch, but Dana's smile grew wide, almost smug. That was all Kayla needed to see. Dana wasn't just showing bias. She wasn't just mishandling a client. She was actively working against her own institution. Kayla's stomach turned. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about her mother's work, her firm, and everything her family had built. She could no longer stay still. The fire inside her ignited. Stronger than anger now, determination. She wasn't just a girl with a check. She was a witness, and she needed to act. Her gaze dropped to the leather-bound notebook she always kept in her bag, a habit her mom had encouraged. In it, she had already been writing down the things she'd experienced, the disrespect, the double standards. But this was bigger. This was evidence, and it needed to be recorded. Every detail, Kayla didn't yet know what she could do with the information, but she knew one thing for sure. She needed to document everything. She needed to be ready. While Dana and Brennan continued their whispered exchange, Kayla opened her notebook, her fingers slightly trembling. She wrote quickly but precisely, noting the time, the names, the body language, and the appearance of the marked folder. Every detail, every suspicious gesture, etched in ink. Moments later, the conversation ended. Brennan stood. Dana shook his hand with a smile that felt far too polished. Then he walked right past Kayla toward the exit, his pace steady, his expression unreadable. Once he left, Dana returned to the front counter, her smile now gone. Her eyes locked onto Kayla, her stare cold and unwavering. Kayla felt a chill ripple down her back. She knew. Dana had sensed something. That Kayla had seen too much. Kayla's mind was spinning. She didn't have all the answers, but she had enough to know that something was seriously wrong. Something corrupt. Something that could damage not just her, mother's company, but everything her family had built. Her grip on the pen tightened, resolve solidifying inside her. Yes, she had been mistreated. Yes, she had been humiliated. But now she held something more powerful than a deposit slip. She held the truth, and it was time to use it. Just then, as if her thoughts had summoned her, the bank's double doors swung open. In walked her mother, Dr. Simone Morris. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. Her mother's presence filled the room. Graceful, grounded, and dressed in sleek business attire, a striking contrast to the tension that had built in the space. Dana stood up straighter at the sight of her, her posture snapping into formality. "Ms. Morris," Dana greeted, her voice suddenly coated with false sweetness. "I wasn't expecting you today. How can I assist you?" But Simone didn't engage in pleasantries. She walked straight toward Kayla, her gaze sharp as she took in the scene. Her daughter alone, pushed to the margins of the room. A flicker of fury crossed her features. Quickly, masked by a calm, controlled expression. "Kayla," she said gently, her voice filled with concern. "Are you all right?" Kayla nodded, holding back the flood of emotion behind her eyes. "I'm okay, Mom," Kayla said, her voice steady, even as her mind churned with everything she had just witnessed. "But there's something you need to hear." She reached into her bag and pulled out her leather notebook, then began sharing everything. From the subtle favoritism shown to white clients, to the cold, dismissive way she had been treated, and most importantly, the confidential meeting she had seen between Dana Whitmore and Lucas Brennan. She read from her notes aloud, clear and composed, her voice firm as she recounted the marked folder, the whispers, and the suspicious body language. Simone listened closely. Her expression hardened with every word. When Kayla finished, her mother turned slowly toward Dana. "Ms. Whitmore," Simone said, her voice sharp as glass, "I believe you owe my daughter an apology. And I believe you owe me an explanation." Dana's confident mask wavered. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice faltering. But Simone didn't hesitate. "I know exactly what you've been doing," she replied coolly. "You've been feeding confidential information to one of our competitors. This isn't just mistreatment of a client. It's corporate betrayal." The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Kayla watched as Dana's face drained of color. Her posture slumped under the weight of the accusation. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Simone didn't wait. "You're terminated, Ms. Whitmore. Effective immediately." Her words echoed through the bank. Final. The same security guard who had once manhandled Kayla was now walking swiftly toward Dana. "Please escort Ms. Whitmore out," Simone instructed, her tone firm and unyielding. As Dana was led away, her pride shattered, her career crumbling, Simone turned back to the others in the bank. "This institution will be undergoing a full internal review," she announced. "We will implement new policies to ensure no one is ever treated the way my daughter was treated today, not ever." The room was still, silent, but charged. Kayla's heart beat strong in her chest as she watched her mother take charge with grace and power. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. An internal investigation exposed Dana's long-standing misconduct, from discrimination to attempted sabotage of Simone's firm. She wasn't working alone, but she was the first to fall. Leadership at the bank was completely restructured, and a new program on fair, inclusive banking was implemented across all branches. As for Elena Cruz, the young teller who had shown Kayla a flicker of kindness, she was promoted, recognized for her professionalism amid the chaos. And Kayla? She changed too. Her experience became a catalyst. She was invited to speak at Grafton Academy, sharing her story with fellow students and educators. She used her voice to raise awareness on financial literacy, bias, and equity in public spaces. Standing at the podium, she smiled, not because the journey had been easy, but because it had transformed her. Her pain had become purpose, and through her courage, she had become a voice for others, just like her mother had always taught her. Even when the system fails you, you can rise, and you can create change.